with you live. It's been so long. This is about terrain theory. We are going to talk about the differences of germ theory and terrain theory and be able to hopefully understand a little bit better. So I did this a little while ago, right? I talked about terrain theory, the beautiful frog coming out of the lake picture. And this is kind of just some update. I'm going to try to do this a little more succinctly. You can ask questions. I am using Restream, which broadcasts out to YouTube. That means that you can chat to me live and I can share my screen with you. So that's really exciting. If you are on the YouTube, you do not have to have a YouTube account. It's your Google account. So you can log in with YouTube using your Google account and then post comments, which will then come through to me. They take quite a few seconds to come through, and then my reply takes quite a few seconds to come back out. So like 8-second delay or something. So if you have questions or you're commenting, put them in there. I will see them. We'll address them as we can, but I'm so excited. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief overview as if you have no idea what anything about terrain theory is, and then we're going to jump into kind of some practicals of what does that mean. And then, as always, this is a theory, so I'm excited to have you, my community, having a conversation about what does this mean and what about this, right? So some of the things I've learned actually more about the theory is in the, well, how does that apply to this way? Kind of like pushback, right? Which is great. So please do that either today if you're thinking about it, or in the comments or in conversations later. So I'm so excited. And hello, everyone who is joining us live. This will be recorded and you will be able to watch this replay, share it with friends. It's just going to live on the YouTube channel. So that's great. Okay, first off, what in the world is terrain theory? I use that word so strongly now because I have studied it for so long, but I realize it's not a common thing. Terrain theory was first created or made popular by Antoine Béchamp. There were other people that held the same opinion as his, but he's the one who called it terrain or cellular theory, actually. So when I'm saying terrain, you guys have seen it spelled, but it's like the environment. What's the environment of our bodies? Or the environment of a wine grape growing vineyard. That's what it's called. What's the environment of a vineyard, right? And a lot of work that both Béchamp and Pasteur did at the same time was on vineyards and the mold that was growing on the grapevine. So one book where I've learned a lot, I'm going to show you some of my favorite resources. This is Pasteur et Béchamp, a lost chapter in the history of biology. So this is really coming to discuss what it looks like to what happened, right? It's almost an investigative journalism of a tit for tat on Pasteur published something, then Béchamp published something, and then Pasteur published a rebuttal in public papers. Very, very fun. This author also pulled together things like what Florence Nightingale had to say about this, and then the timing, which is fascinating. The timing of that. So terrain theory, to answer that question, terrain theory is a different theory from germ theory. Germ theory that Louis Pasteur made famous basically says if there is a disease or germ or animalia in the air and it comes and gets in you and you can't fight it off or get it to go away, then you get sick. Terrain theory says if you are at a poisoned or degraded state in your body, then you will show symptoms of illness that may or may not be involved with a bacteria or virus or fungal, what we would call infection. But the poisoning comes first. That's the main difference. Now, there's lots of discussion about this. And if people have read Dr. Tom Cowan's work, like The Contagion Myth, him and Sally Fallon, you may understand, and Dr. Andrew Wakefield, in his video coming out, or part 1 has released, I think, right? It's this idea that viruses are not what we think they are, right? Viruses maybe don't exist, or viruses are called, I haven't thought about this for a long time because I feel like it's missing the point. So I don't actually, I'm not in the headset mindset of what does germs do, or how do they attack us, or how do we do, and which ones exist, and blah blah. I'm really interested to see what is the body doing with an infection, with a detoxification, with a viral illness or bacterial illness. What is happening, right? That's what we really need to know in practicality. Can our body handle it? Is it a good thing? What's going on? Okay, so terrain theory says it's more than just the germ. There's poisoning first, or decay of the cells first, and then germ theory says it's the germ, and if you get rid of the germ, then you don't have any problems. Okay? Pasteur versus Béchamp. All right. Pleomorphism. So this is something that I have learned about unbeknownst to me for a couple of years, a few years, ever since I started GAPS. Dr. Natasha with the GAPS diet has, at least for some degree of time, studied pleomorphism because she taught it in different ways that was very subtle, without calling it that. But Béchamp also talked about this concept of pleomorphism. And his book, if you're interested, which he it's not called Pleomorphism by him, but that's the name that society has kind of ended on. The Blood and Its Third Element by Antoine Béchamp. This is his life work. This is talking about what is happening in the cells. So Dr. Natasha did a really cool slideshow presentation at GAPS OnCon in February or March. And I wanted to share that slide with you because this is an important part. Then we're going to kind of talk about practicals and what this means and where it goes from here. So let's do a screen share. Maybe. I don't remember how to screen share. Uh-oh. Well, okay, it's fine. I can describe it. It's not a big deal. So she really talked about pleomorphism, and there are some cells, and these cells are called, I always say this word wrong. There's lots of different things, but endobiont, so ENDOBIONT, endobiont. Endobiont are cells that we can observe in live people under a live microscope instead of dead microscope, which is what we've done most of our study of cells under. So under a live microscope, these endobionts show up and they are in our bodies. When we start having disease and decay, they start changing into virus, bacteria, and then fungal cells that we originally had identified as separate cells, that we now can watch you change the environment, and that cell that was a virus becomes staph or whatever. So you can actually watch these cells morph and change. They're called soft cell. Let's see. L forms of bacteria is kind of it. There's no rigid cell wall. They're also called, they're a microbial prototype. They are capable of turning into any microbe. And when the body gets damaged, these come. Antoine Béchamp, so this is a vital thing. And I actually was in a brief conversation on Telegram about an immune topic, and I just posted something about terrain theory. And I had someone push back pretty strongly, didn't really have interest in learning anything. But when I tried to explain, no, I'm not saying that bacteria and viruses don't exist. I'm just saying that the body is getting cleaned up, or there's disease or damage first, and then we are cleansing. And here's Antoine Béchamp's quote. Bacteria found in man and animals do not cause disease. They will not or cannot attack healthy tissues. First, the body has to become diseased through poor nutrition, pollution, or trauma in order for the harmless microzymas, which is what he called those, to transform into pathogenic microbes. So this is the basis of terrain theory, that these microbes are going to be helping us clean up. Okay, so those were the vital parts of this. When I sat back and thought, okay, the viewpoint of germ theory, we have a disease, we have to attack it. We have a war on viruses, we have a war on whatever. That's a very common discussion in our medical world, even in the natural world, right? You want to kill the parasites with an anti-parasitic. Maybe it's herbal, maybe it's medication. But this idea of this war on. And the big idea of terrain theory is instead of attacking the microbe that's there, and by the way, it'll just pleomorph into another type of microbe that you're not actually attacking, and then you have to attack that one and you'll just chase it all over because it's trying to do a job for you. It's trying to do a job of cleaning up and healing, repairing damaged tissue. So, that being said, what does Florence Nightingale say about this? She does not believe in germ theory either. And what's really interesting is she wrote in 1890 about terrain theory. Sorry, in 1860, she published an attack on terrain theory. Sorry, an attack on germ theory, 17 years before Louis Pasteur adopted it. And this is from this book, page 13. Florence Nightingale said of infection, diseases are not individuals arranged in classes like cats and dogs, but conditions growing out of one another. It is not living in a continual, is it not living in a continual mistake to look upon diseases as we do now, as separate entities which must exist like cats and dogs instead of looking upon them as conditions, like a dirty or clean condition, and just as much under our control, or rather as the reactions of kindly nature against the conditions which we have placed ourselves, meaning we made a mess of our world and the body or the microbes are trying to fix it. That's what she's saying. I was brought up to believe that smallpox, for instance, was a thing. There was one specimen and it went on propagating itself, just like there was a first dog or pair of dogs that propagated themselves. Smallpox would not begin itself any more than a new dog would begin itself without a parent dog. Since then, I have seen with my own eyes and smelled with my own nose smallpox growing up in first specimens, either in closed rooms or in overcrowded wards, where it could not have possibly have been caught, but must have begun. And I have diseases begin, grow up, and turn into one another. Now, dogs do not turn into cats. I've seen, for instance, with a little overcrowding, continued fever grow up, and with a little more typhoid fever, and with a little more typhus, all in the same ward or hut. Would it not be far better, truer, and more practical if we looked upon diseases in this light? For diseases, as all experience shows, are adjectives, not noun sustantives. And then these are her notes to people dealing with infection. True nursing ignores infection except to prevent it. Cleanliness and fresh air from open windows with unremitting attention to the patient are the only defense a true nurse either needs or asks for. Wise and humane management of the patient is the best safeguard against infection. The greater part of nursing consists of preserving cleanliness. And the specific disease doctrine is the grand refuge of weak, uncultured, and unstable minds, such as now rule in the medical profession. There are no specific diseases, there are specific disease conditions. And this is the first edition of Notes on Nursing, which was published in 1860, which is this book right here, which I love. It's small, it's thin. Every single person should read this book. Okay. Wow. One, she did not pull any punches. I love Florence Nightingale. The more I study her, the more I love her. Number two, think about what she said. There are disease states. It's an adjective. It's a state of being or a state of description as opposed to a steady state or noun, right? Which, if you think about in practicality, that is what you experience. If you have had sickness, think about how adjective that feels. Especially when you start experiencing sickness with a little bit of a more open paradigm, instead of like, wow, this is attacking me and I better fight back, but actually like working with your body to cleanse the infection or finish, even fighting back, but working with your body by like taking nutrition and calcium is a very different idea than like kill it, right? Kill it with probiotics, kill it with whatever. Now, natural people usually will the immune system will kill it, right? Let the immune system kill it. And what I am suggesting with terrain theory and what I'm coming to understand more and more is there's more of a cooperation. The immune system is helping to do something, and the viruses and bacteria and fungus are also helping to do that thing. So let's step back and go, what is germ theory and what is terrain theory? What does that mean in this implication? So, germ theory says the germ comes in, the bacteria is bad, and we should kill it, and then we will feel better. This was done, by the way, in a time when we believed humans were sterile. We know they are not sterile. We have so many microbes coming out of every single cell. There are more microbes than people by far. There are more microbes than DNA in our body by far. Between 50 and 90%, depending on who you ask. DNA in our body is non-human DNA. So we cannot be sterile. We cannot avoid bacteria and be healthy. That's not how it works. So why do we continue to cling to germ theory? There are lots of implications, of course, right? It's going to be a huge shift of paradigm for a lot of people. Even naturally minded, let's eat good, nourishing foods and not take antibiotic people can have a really hard time when I start discussing this, which one, I want the discussion because it's still a theory. So let's not call it the answer because it's still a theory. But two, it's a huge paradigm shift, even for naturally minded people to go, okay, what does that mean? I'm not feeding my immune system to fight off an infection. So why do I take supplements? Why do I take olive oil? Why do I drink stock? Why do we do calcium lactate, right? What is that about? Interestingly, when you start looking at the things that if you come to me as a patient, I would tell you to do for detoxification are the same things, in fact, that I will tell you to do when you're sick. Eat fat, have meat stock, do some calcium lactate because calcium, magnesium, they help to detox. B vitamins help to detox. They also strengthen the immune system to fight the infection. Do you see how it kind of it's the same thing? I really got introduced to this concept when I was starting with GAPS, and people kept asking me, well, how do I know if it's die off or detox or I'm getting sick? Because it feels the same. Yes, it does. Because it's the same. All of it is the body cleansing or restoring. So in this book, I'm just going to read a very short paragraph. This is in past the preface to the first paragraph of Florence Nightingale's book, Notes on Nursing, which was written to women who were going to be nurses in their homes, not to her nursing students, just as a note. Okay. Notes on nursing, what it is and what it is not. Side note, disease, a reparative process. This is our first thing. Shall we begin by taking it as a general principle that all disease, at some period or another of its course, is more or less a reparative process, not necessarily accompanied with suffering, an effort of nature to remedy a process of poisoning or of decay which has taken place weeks, months, and sometimes years beforehand, unnoticed. The termination of the disease being then when the antecedent process was going on determined. The last sentence is a little weird, but the basic thing of this is she believed that the person who created sanitation in hospitals believed that disease and suffering was caused by a lack of nursing care or support to the body. And the body's disease process or the restoration process or reparative process was because the body was attempting to remedy decay or poisoning. Interesting. Very interesting, right? So what really blew my mind in this train theory, and actually what gave a lot of credence to it, because I started learning from Tom Cowan's book, Understanding What Pleomorphism Is, and from this book, just I knew Antoine Béchamp said different things in past years. I started studying. And then to know that the person who gave us sanitary practices in hospitals also was a trained theorist was very interesting. So I had to kind of settle out. Okay, so this idea that the environment's what matters, but not the germs, is not exactly wholly correct. It can leave confusion in the interpretation. And a lot of people right now, in different circles, including the Weston A. Price circle, just because of how certain things got discussed, because it was a theory and it was being just conversationally discussed as we went on. But there's a lot of confusion about, well, what do? We can identify different viruses and bacteria, or at least bacteria, right? It's interesting to note that none of those ever have been proven to make people sick. In fact, many people have tried to make people sick with a virus isolated, like even a rabies virus, and Pasteur was unable to make any dog contract rabies if the rabies virus was isolated and then injected into an animal that was well. Never, ever, ever transferred illness. However, he did find if he took the diseased, purulent matter of that animal without extracting the virus, isolating the virus, and then injected all of that into the animal that was well, he then would create rabies virus. So that would highly suggest that it is not the transference of viruses or bacteria that make us ill, it is the transference of poison. So then we go into some of the, I know this is wandering. I hope you'll stick with me, and then we're going to get to, like, I don't know. It's a theory. We have to kind of talk about different aspects. So getting to the idea of so that's rabies, right? There's a rabies virus. Sorry, there's a rabies vaccine, right? That Pasteur developed that we give to people when they get bit by a mad dog. Very interesting that that happens. What's also interesting, and I did not bring these books, but I have read multiple times, the cure for bite from a mad dog is to cauterize the wound. And that was actually a pretty successful treatment for rabies before we had the vaccine. So it's just interesting. Number two, what about polio? So polio is a virus that we get, and it was contracted at the poolside, and then people got it, and some people were okay, and some people got really drastic symptoms like they stopped breathing, they became paralyzed, right? We all know polio is really bad. Or is it? So, polio has been in the groundwater of probably what every single human being has drinking for all of human history. That's what they now have studied and probably come to a conclusion of. So, why did we only for a little while have an outbreak of polio and then we didn't anymore? Interesting that you ask. There is a specific use of DDT chemical and that happened at the time of the polio outbreak. So there are theories that the polio outbreak was actually a DDT poisoning, which is a nervous system poisoning that caused paralysis, and all the symptoms of polio is also the symptoms of DDT poisoning. And maybe the polio virus, here's where train theory comes in, and pleomorphism. Maybe the polio virus was actually in high amounts in those people's bodies, because maybe the polio virus helps to clean the bodies out of that particular toxin. So this is where I'm kind of sitting with as I've gone, okay, disease and damaged tissue definitely is the start of problems. There's symptoms that happen because of that. We all have experienced at least some colds in our life where you got sick and then you felt better after you were sick, right? It's like way better than you have in your life, which would indicate your restorative or reparative process was actually successful. And then you had a restored or repaired functioning of your body that you did not previously have recently. That happens, right? We have that. Okay, not always. And that's because I think of malnutrition and lack of rest. We do not stop and rest when we're sick. I don't do the best job either, right? It's hard in our culture to do that. And even the people who do it the best probably don't do it as well as people did back in the day, except the working class. They didn't rest either. So we get it. But they also were sick and had chronic coughs, right? When we look at the patterns, you see the patterns just making sense over and over again. Okay, the last thing about that idea with polio and being reproducing, kind of the proof of that, right? And pulling lots of different thoughts is measles. So I was talking with my local homeopath, and she was presenting a study that was done, and you can go look this up. I have Googled it, with measles virus and brain cancer. So there, it was discovered that if you had had wild measles in your childhood, not vaccine measles, but wild measles in your childhood, you have a 0.02% chance of getting brain cancer in your life. Pretty much non existent. Interesting. Then they took that one step further and started injecting measles virus into brain tumors, and they started shrinking. Interesting, right? So it really proves this point that viruses help us to clean up, to stay clean. So the theory off of that would be measles helps you detox something that can accumulate in your brain. And if you're not able to get rid of it, it will eventually cause damage enough to your cells to cause cancer. That makes sense, right? Well, then if you inject the measles virus, it starts that cleanup job. And now all of a sudden you don't need the cancer because cancer is just damaged cells damaged by toxins. That's all cancer is. It's complicated because we have a lot of toxins and we're very toxic, and it takes a while to cleanse, and you might not be able to cleanse fast enough to survive, right? But cancer and what it is not complex, in my opinion. It can be complex to treat, right? But it's not actually complex because it's just damaged cells that stop communicating with the rest of the body, and then they have problems. So, all of these threads of the major illnesses that we have in our culture come up when you start studying this idea of toxicity and then pleomorphism and the fungal overlay, which fungus, virus, bacteria, fungus. Fungus is the last step of when you're so toxic, you get this fungal overgrowth, and you cannot get cancer or autoimmune disease or anything without a fungal overgrowth in your body. Like that always precedes these bigger things because fungus actually eats some of the most unhealthy toxins, the metals and things like that. So there's just this like link and link and link and link, and it's hard. And I wanted this to be more succinct than it is. So God bless those of you that are staying on or are still here in this video. But just this idea of if there's so much disease and damaged tissue, diseased, quote, damaged, decaying tissue in our bodies, which there is, then it would explain why we get sick more. It would explain why we have this increasing amount of not only acute illnesses, but also of chronic illnesses. And if the body is getting stopped, if the body is not allowed to clean up because we take antipyretics, which are anti-fever medications. If we take cough suppressants, you need to sleep. I get it. But like if you're stopping your body, if you take steroid medications, if you just keep doing antifungals instead of addressing why the yeast is there in the first place, you are going to progress to worse illnesses and diseases. It's just how it's going to happen. I just am so convinced that you can't thwart nature. We're not going to get there. So what do? You clean up. Now, cleaning up is two things. It's avoiding toxins. It's getting rid of toxins, right? So it's toxin detox or avoidance. And then it's feeding the body. So those are the two things. Less toxins, more nutrition. When we have more nutrition, we are able to do things like have a strong detox system in our liver because you feed it enough B vitamins. Your nervous system is not vulnerable to a neurotoxin like sugar or red dye number 5 because you have been building it up with cholesterol and minerals. Your immune system is able to repair any kind of inflammatory damage very quickly because you are eating the right foods, right? Over and over and over, you look at, well, how do we do that? How do we repair that? How do we prevent that? It's nutrition. We need building blocks in our body, right? Makes sense. And then detoxing. We need to avoid toxins. That is great and well and good to some extent. You and I know we cannot avoid toxins completely. There's no way. You're going to have glyphosate in probably every single water source except glaciers have glyphosate in it at this point. It's really good to avoid glyphosate by not eating GMO corn, but also it's probably better to take a desiccated liver capsule with glyphosate in the gelatin because you know what? That drink of water you took probably had it. That food you ate out definitely had it, right? Like we cannot avoid toxins. We can avoid a lot of them, and that lowers the burden, which is a good idea. I'm not saying just eat whatever you want. That's not at all what I'm saying, right? Put Glade air fresheners in your kitchen. No, don't. Like you do not want natural scents. You do not want fake foods. You do not want blah, blah, blah at all. What you do want to do is eat as nourishing as you can and realize you cannot do this perfectly. You live in a world that is polluted. Some people are going to be called to do political action about that. Definitely at least support them in some way, even just in prayers, those who are called to do political action, because it is important for us to have people see this like DDT that we used to spray on kids that we now know is awful. And Teflon, which finally admitted that they knew about the horrendous effects of that chemical, right? There are so many other things in our world, and with public pressure and education, there's things that will go away and change. And there will always be poisons and toxins. And even if we went back to the good old days, without these man-made chemicals, you still have smoke and, mercury and natural radiation. Like, we cannot be in an environment without things that break down our bodies. That's why we have to do food. You can't just cleanse, you have to eat. You have to strengthen your body. Okay. When you strengthen your body, when you eat good food, you have less decaying tissue. You have less poisoned tissue and toxins in your body, which means you will have less disease. So, this is why you change your diet and eat better, and now your kids don't get sick all the time. Except they do, right? Okay, what happens here? A lot of people, when they start their diet of nutritional food, a lot of people will then have a season where they get sick all the time. This is what makes so much sense. Their bodies are restoring. They're finally eating good food, and now the body has the energy and the resources to clean up the toxins that they had to have ignored that would eventually have caused autoimmune disease and cancer. And now you're just getting some colds. And as Dr. Natasha says, bless the cold, right? Bless that cold because it is keeping you from far worse. So, what do we do as people? We need to look at supporting the body. Do not fight what your body's doing. Support what your body is doing. As soon as we go the war on, or I will kill the, it's bad. It's a bad sentence. Don't start sentences that way because it puts you in the wrong mindset. I need to stop the. Not even that. You don't need to stop the fever. You need to give the body what it needs so the fever is no longer necessary. The fever, by the way, does two really amazing things. It regels the water in your cells. This is Gerald Pollack's fourth phase of water. Tom Cowan references it in Cancer and the New Biology of Water. This idea that when you bring your water up to a little over body temperature, 100-ish degrees, just like if you're making Jell-O, your cells will regel. The good news is that makes your cells more communicative, and it also excludes toxins. So that gelatinous colloidal substance in your cells will push out any kind of toxins and kind of restructure itself and leave you with clean cells. You feel a little bit crappy for a while because that toxin is now in your bloodstream and your liver has to get it out, or your kidneys or your skin have to get it out, or your lungs. So that's why you then have a cough with mucus, right? So fever, and then you get a cough because the body's getting it out. Hooray! Good job, body. We get worried because we feel like we're getting worse. You have a fever and now you have a cough. Yes, that's exactly what you want to happen because of the process that's happening. So that's happening. You're detoxing. This is why I think standard process teaches that calcium is protective of infection. So if you have enough calcium in your tissue, you're less likely to get a infection or overgrowth of bacteria or viruses, which is true. Why is it true? It's true, I think, because you're detoxing your cells. So your body doesn't need to call a bacteria or virus in to help because you're already giving the body what it needs to repair the tissue. Except sometimes it does need this infection, and then that happens, right? So fevers do two things. They regel the cells. They also turn those endobidants or whatever back into the pre-natural state, like not virus, not bacteria, not fungal. It turns them into a natural state of waiting for there to be a problem again. So when you have a fever, you actually restore those to the physiological safe zone as opposed to being in an infectious zone, which is great. That means you're going to feel better because they're not needed for the moment, right? And those can become harmful. I'm not saying that parasites don't cause unpleasant symptoms or that staph infections don't kill people, because they do. But is the staph overgrowth what killed them, or was the poisoning what killed them? That's really the question. I don't really see anyone doing research about that. Please send any my way that you have, because we're not looking at that, right? The whole medicine world is in germ theory, and most of the natural world is also in germ theory, because they don't know any different. So, okay, so what do we do? We don't fight the body, we let it happen. One, we prevent it, and I love that Florence Nightingale talks about that, right? The nurse ignores infection except to prevent it with open air and things like that, right? And so airing out your rooms, super important. If you're feeling discouraged, stuffy, stuck, try just opening your windows. It takes 5 minutes. You should air out your home every day. I don't do it every day, although I have one window that I never close in my house now. It's a little window. It's open, a few inches, and I closed it 5 times in a 365-day period when it's super windy and it's like I'm cold. But I almost always have that window open, and then I air the whole house. You feel instantly better because fresh air matters. Yes, the body invites in only what it needs, or the body already has it and it only activates when it's needed. So that definitely is very true. Okay, so air, water, clean food, nourishing food, lack of stress, which is hardly spoken about in Old English literature because they did not have the stress that we do, but we know that stress adds on to this state because it stresses the body. It uses resources faster. Your minerals, your vitamin A, your vitamin C, your cholesterol gets used up quicker in stress. Your B vitamins get used up quicker in stress. So stress and stressful things like cold, hard work, lack of sleep, crappy food, those deplete your body of its resources and damage your tissue. And then we now have tissue that's hurt. Now we get an infection. If it doesn't heal with a viral infection, which is the easiest, cleanest, that's why we just get viruses, then it goes to bacterial, which is much more serious. The immune system is much more involved. And then we get into kind of a chronic fungal infection at the end, right? So when you have a virus, let it go. A non-neurologically damaged person's body will not create a fever too high to be unsafe. And I have also discovered in my practice that calcium lactate, which has some magnesium in it also. I have not had a kid, even with a pretty high fever, had a seizure because the seizure threshold is lowered by the magnesium and calcium, or it's higher, so you're not as likely to get a seizure. But even seizures are actually a cleansing process, so it's very interesting to see seizures with fevers because they're both cleansing. So all of it just fits together when you start looking at this. So, okay, I was kind of shooting for 45 minutes, so we're getting close. So does anyone have questions or thoughts or like, well, what is this that maybe I missed talking about or haven't thought about before? So type in your comments there. But ultimately, while you're doing that, kind of the sum up is our body should be well fed and as clean as possible, and then strengthened so they can clean up from what we're exposed to that we have no control of. And then when the body decides it needs to clean up, we need to let it. Don't stop it. Uncomfortability is so much better than a lifetime of uncomfortability with an autoimmune disease or cancer, right? Having 3 days to a week of a cold is so worth it in that. And I was talking to someone about this and they were like, oh, interesting. So we stop fevers when we're sick and then we create fevers when we're doing a detox process. And I was like, yep, that's exactly what we do. We create fevers to detox when the body is doing the exact same thing with an illness. So this is why I believe in terrain theory, not because I care about the debate of whether viruses are real or there are I don't remember, X something. I can't remember the name before that. It's fine. Like, I don't care about that debate. I care what the body's doing. I care about studying the activity. I don't want to squibble in this. It's fine. It's cool that people are doing it. It's fascinating to read, but like, I care about the body's doing in vivo, right? In action. And so when the body is needing something and it's doing something, I trust the body's doing it. I look out, I go, ooh, we have symptoms. What am I missing? What do I need to supply this person with or my own body with to help? Sometimes it's detox support, like taking detox baths, doing hyperthermia, which is getting yourself hot and going to bed, basically. So you give yourself a fever a little bit. Doing oil pulling, doing enemas, eating nourishing foods, because meat, stock, and fat will detox you also because they're feeding. Juicing, which is directly cleansing, right? So all of that is so important in terms of what you're doing. So feed your body, cleanse your body, support your body. If you do something like calcium or detox bath that makes you feel better, good job. If you feel worse again in an hour, do it again, do something else, right? The suffering, and this is what she talks about a lot in this book, the suffering of the patient is mostly a lack of nursing care, not from the disease itself, meaning we are not good at deciding how to help our body, and we are even worse at our generation, right? And this is one of the things I'm passionate about bringing back is the education of how to support your body, so that you can hear what your body's saying so you don't have to suffer so much. Okay. Question. What would you recommend if someone lives right next to the glyphosate field? I can't move right now. I'm sorry. So, Dr. Stephanie Seneff is the glyphosate expert, and there are things that help. I can't think of any off the top of my head in terms of like, I feel like some people talk about nitric oxide, which, by the way, beet kvass is apparently a good exchange for that. So, that would be good. It'd be really important to be doing high fat, high B vitamin, high mineral diet because that's what supports healthy neurons and myelin sheaths, which the glyphosates are fat soluble. Eating lots of fermented foods. Fermented foods actually trap and either denature or bind and remove toxins out of through the body, through the stool. So one of the reasons that you eat fermented foods is actually just to literally get rid of your trash. So if you're gonna eat pizza, at least eat sauerkraut with it, kind of idea. So if you are breathing in glyphosate or whatever, you need to do that. If when you see the fields getting sprayed, you want to lock up your house airtight. This is not a time to air your house for as long as you can, right? Kids should not be playing outside, all that kind of stuff. Again, the focus is avoiding what we can and then helping the body strengthen what we can't. And you're going to have to read through because a lot of people who study like Dr. Stephanie Seneff are going to, they understand how awful it is. So you need to understand you're reading the like, this is bad because that's their mission is to tell people it's bad. You already know it's bad. And so what I want you to read her stuff in is, okay, it's bad, but what does it hurt? Which parts of the body, which cells are especially vulnerable, what states are especially vulnerable to glyphosate. Don't be in those states. Don't be in that deficiency state, right? Don't be in that stress state. So find where, oh, it's especially bad here, like vaccines combined with glyphosate. It's pretty bad. So you did not probably do that, right? So those types of things to make sure that you are not putting your body in a state where it's specifically vulnerable and whenever possible, strengthen it. And then just general detox support. What minerals get depleted with glyphosate? I'm sure there are some. Maybe copper is coming to mind. I could be making that up, right? What minerals get depleted? Make sure you're eating foods rich in those minerals. But in general, fermented foods, meat stock, animal fat, and organ meats are what you should do always because they will always support the systems in a broad, strong way. So, and then we always have solutions to problems when we understand what the problem is. And you could say someone's going to have to live next to that field. And I understand there are realities of life. But also, when you go, this is something that needs to change, you will be able to figure out a change at some point, right? And it may not be today. It's not going to be today, right? It may not be in a year, but you're going to get away from that field as soon as possible if you decide it's something you need to do, right? We can decide a project needs to happen and still not act on it or complete it for years. You decide you wanted to go to college and 5 years later you graduate, right? That doesn't mean you were inactive. You can be active about pursuing, looking, getting a second job, paying off debt, whatever it takes to be able to move away and create a solution to the problem that you have. We always have the capacity to do that. So, not picking on you at all. It's just something I'm actually really passionate about is we all have solution ability. We don't identify the problem and decide to change it. Once you do that, you're going to do it. People call this manifestation or whatever. I would say when you give attention to something, you're going to make changes either consciously or subconsciously to change it. So sure, manifestation is the popular word for it, but that's what it is you have decided this is a problem. I want it different. And as soon as you say those words, you will start moving in the direction as fast as possible, which may be years. That's fine, to get it to change. All right, as a sidebar. Sorry. You're welcome. So, anyone else have a quick question? Thank you for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Um, it was helpful for me to kind of talk through. I'm sorry, also, my brain just has been struggling all day, so I was not as succinct as I wanted to be, partly just my brain. I took some cod liver oil before, but it wasn't enough. um, it helped. I was worse earlier, so that's actually good. Yeah, I love terrain theory. I did an Instagram live with a little bit briefer about terrain theory on Be Well with Amy. If you're not following me there, definitely go to Be Well with Amy. We also have Be Well Clinic Loveland and Be Well Clinic North Glen. So hop on those channels, follow them. And exciting news, I have opened a new business called University of Vibrant Health. This is the first time I think I've talked about it publicly. So University of Vibrant Health goal is to create education, both in person and online. Eventually, I have grandiose dreams to create a change in this education lack that we have. So there's not even a website or anything like that. However, you can do my first course, which is on gapstraining.com, getting started on gaps. Getting started on GAPS is a course to teach you how to do the GAPS diet, how to make the meat stock, why we do it, what makes sense, what are some principles of healing, what about detoxing, what is die-off. All these things are on that course, and you can go there. And if you are a patient of our clinic, we have a discount coupon code for you. So make sure you email our office for that if you are a patient of our clinic. If you would like to be a patient of our clinic, you can do that too, bewellclinic.net. All right. Thank you so much, everyone who's on. This replay will be available. Please share it. I'm so excited about this. Give me your feedback. I probably will try to do like another succinct one. That's what this one was supposed to be, but it is more succinct than the first one. But I'm passionate about talking about this. I think it's one of the most important things for us to understand is what to do about how to interact with the microbes in our environment and the disease caused by the toxins and decay of our malnourished tissues and poisoned tissues, which is what terrain theory is talking about. And it is I will argue for a long time, that is a much more complete and helpful way to look at disease than just looking at germ identification and destroying either by natural or medication things. So there's my summary. All right. Lovely to have you all on. Thank you for joining me live. If you've gotten on late or want to watch it, this replay should be instantly available as soon as it's done. I will try to get sooner than later the books linked that I held up here. And as soon as Dr. Natasha publicly posts her pleomorphism and heart talk, I will make sure to link that too. But she does not have one that's not available behind the OnCon paywall. So, all right. Good night, everyone. Have a lovely day, and I will talk to you later. Good to see you.